So let's start with kind of the fundamentals of those best practices and things that we absolutely recommend or think you should enforce in any security system. First one is knowing about your assets. So creating an inventory of all the assets present in your deployment. And as you saw, Mathieu put a very strong point on this, is that all of all an attacker needs is a default or unsecure password, right? There's so many techniques to force your way in systems with weak credentials. So we really can't stress this enough. Implementing complete and stringent password policies with lots of methods of protection, strength, and rotation guidelines. This is really essential, making sure that you have a safe and efficient way of managing all the device passwords. And then keep your stuff up to date. We mean it. Keep everything up to date. It's the best way, it's the only way to get access to the latest cybersecurity features. So we're not talking only about your security system, but every piece of software, device firmware, Windows, and so on. Then make sure your system can log every change and every critical action made by users in the system. So that's audit trails, right? Or activity trails. It's very important in security systems. It helps you keep a full chain of custody and really know exactly what happened from the moment evidence was captured with your VMS, for example, all the way to the end of the investigation process. And then encrypt everything you possibly can. We just saw like video metadata communications. This is going to ensure that your data stays secure. And again, encryption is nothing without the other layers of just making sure that the right people have access to the right things. So this is granting minimal access and privileges and keeping track and updating those privileges over time, because so many recent attacks, and we've seen many in the financial sectors that have been devastating, that those attacks have been because an employee had inadequate privileges for their work, and then they leaked data or they got their precious credentials stolen. So very quickly on asset inventory, an information asset register is used to record and manage information assets, right? It's to identify and manage the risk posed to all of your assets. So this will kind of inform the implementation of any controls that you're going to use to mitigate the vulnerabilities. And if you don't know what you have, you can't protect it, right? So what you typically have in your deployments, cameras, controllers, readers, workstations, servers, network devices, mobile devices, and all of the rest of the IoT devices connected somehow, right? So if you don't understand the type of information that you hold, the purpose for which it is held, right? How you collect, how you process that information, and how you manage those devices, it just makes it more difficult to fully secure. So you need to document all of that process, your inventory, and keep it up to date. So we're talking all the network addresses, the serial numbers, software versions, and any information you can have. And a bit more on audit trails. The main benefits here, so we have four main reasons why to use audit trails in a security system. First is user accountability. So a user is anyone who has access to the system somehow, right? So this having strong audit trails, tracking activity of users will promote appropriate user behavior, which can prevent the introduction of viruses, improper use of information, leaking information, or modification to the information, right? So the user knows that their actions are recorded and tied to their unique identity. This is very important. And then you can reconstruct events with audit trails. So if there's an investigation in place, the first step to remediate to a problem is knowing when and how and what. And just having more visibility into this information can really help detecting issues and also preventing future occurrences of things. such as hacking, failures, outages, or corruption of information. And then preventing intrusion. So here with audit trails, we will identify suspicious behavior or actions, things that are happening in your system that should not, that are unusual, because unauthorized access is, again, a very serious problem for most security systems. And also many regulations now mandate for the security of information and the confidentiality. And finally, other problem identification through audit trails. So real-time monitoring, you can automate audit logs to identify problems, for example, that show implementation issues, operational issues, unusual activities in the system, or operator errors even, right? Because human errors are very frequent and they can lead to a cyber breach. And again, we're back to the human factor. Your users are at the core of your risk mitigation strategy. They are the ones you depend on to use the system properly. Otherwise, everything we just saw are not worth much at all. So some things you can tell them and educate on, and this is totally non-exhaustive. Those are some pointers that you can start with. So do not use unknown devices. Do not use those USB sticks. You don't know where they're from, or don't use them at all. There's better ways of sharing information. Then lock your workstation when it's not being used, just to make sure that someone else doesn't jump in and export video evidence. Keep your passwords safe. They are yours. When you're talking user passwords, as Mathieu said, use a password manager on your personal phone. Make sure that you have a very strong master password. And if it's going to be about the devices, then again, use a proper manager to change and rotate all your passwords. Do not share user credentials for the same reasons, because they are yours and nobody should use your credentials. They should ask for permission and get their own. Do not export evidence on USB sticks and DVDs. There's much better ways to do that now. There's secure portals that allow you to export all your video evidence or other data on cases and investigations. And some ways to avoid social engineering attacks. We saw in the previous session that phishing attempts through email, for example, have increased 4,000% in the last few months. So they need to be careful, because they might use that same device, that same workstation, to do other activities. Maybe there's emails in there, right? So do not click on suspicious links. Do not open files shared by strangers. Do not reply to weird financial emails. Even if it comes from someone you know, they might have been hacked. You don't know what happened there. So if there's anything fishy, do not click on anything, and ask the IT department or the security department. Those are pretty basic, but people often don't know about all of these things, and they need to be reminded. So just keep this top of mind for all of your security users.